Change the way you think, and your life will change forever. In 1869, a man who was 27 years old and had just finished from Harvard as a doctor of medicine was having a life crisis. Not only had he been through hard times before, but he also had to deal with illnesses and bouts of sadness during his 6 years of medical school. But this time, it was even worse. He thought about committing suicide for months. The young man was named William James. He went on to become the most famous psychologist in the United States and one of the founders of the School of Pragmatism. James got over his sadness on his own, and it took him 3 years. To be clear, James wasn't just sad. McDermott, who edited William James's works, wrote about how bad his mental health was. James spent a lot of his life trying to figure out why he didn't kill himself. At this time, James also had panic attacks and saw things that weren't there. He had been through the same painful things with his father years before him. Because of this, James thought that his illness was biological and that he couldn't get better. But in 1870, James had a big psychic breakthrough after reading a piece by the French psychologist Charles Renouvier. He wrote in his journal, "I think yesterday was a crisis in my life. I finished the first part of Renouvier's second essay and see no reason why his definition of free will, the sustaining of a thought, because I choose to, and I might have other thoughts, needs to be the definition of an illusion. At any rate, I will assume for the present, until next year, that it is not an illusion. My first act of free will shall be to believe in free will." This realization is at the core of. James understood that we have power over what we think, which means we can pick one thought over another. But James doesn't say that we have power over our minds. A lot of things go through our minds when we take the time to just sit and notice them for a while. The thoughts are just there, and we can't change them. We have free will, though, so we can choose which thoughts to focus on. This means that we can change the direction of awareness. This understanding is very important for our daily lives. It's the difference between saying, "I can't help but feel this way," and saying, "I chose to feel this way." This book is all about choosing. It takes work, but you can learn to keep your thinking in check and choose what you think. There is also a better way to control our thinking that can make our lives and jobs better. That is my main point in this book. For me, the most important thing in life is that you have control over what you think. Your thoughts determine how your life turns out. We can do anything if we change the way we think. That one simple truth changes everything. Thoughts are very important, as many great thinkers have written. But Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was William James's uncle and a big inspiration to him, said it best. "You become what you think about all day long." I think that's true. But we need to understand that thoughts lead to deeds. This means that you can't change what you do without first changing what you think. Let's begin. Why do we need a book about how to think practically? Our brains are the most useful tools we have. They are more useful than any technology or instrument. The writer of Mastery said it best. If there is any instrument you must fall in love with and fetishize, it is the human brain, the most miraculous, awe-inspiring information processing tool devised in the known universe, with the complexity we can't even begin to fathom, and with dimensional powers that far outstrip any piece of technology in sophistication and usefulness. There is one problem, though. We don't know how to use this great tool that we were born with. We're not very realistic, and even though we think we're smart, study shows us to be anything but. Dan Ariely, author of Predictable Irrationality, says this about our decisions. We usually think of ourselves as sitting in the driver's seat with ultimate control over the decisions we make and the direction our life takes. But alas, this perception has more to do with our desires, with how we want to view ourselves, than with reality. Emphasis mine. Over the last 100 years, scientists have found more than 100 cognitive biases, or mistakes in the way people think. This is strong evidence that we are not practical thinkers. A lot of the time, we make choices based on our emotions and gut feelings, without having all the facts. I've read a few books that helped me think and make decisions better. I liked them, but they were all lacking in one thing. They were useful. Through stories, they do a great job of showing why we think the way we do, but I couldn't find a book that showed me how to change the way I think. That's why I wrote this little book. It has everything I know about how to think. That's why I'm writing this, to give you at least one idea that you can use to improve your life, business, or job. That's why I put all of my best ideas in this book. I made Think Straight so that you can read it more than once, and I hope it helps you, especially when things are hard. To keep this book useful, I use theory, stories, and my own experiences to give you tips that you may or may not be able to use. My first thought is that these kinds of books will only help you if you have an open mind. Now, if you don't think that's you, I can save you an hour. Just get rid of this book. Burn it. Ask for your money back. Give it away. Whatever. You must make a clear choice. Use it or leave it. Use what works. I'm not an expert on what people think, because I'm not a physicist, psychologist, philosopher, or anything else. Throughout my whole life, I've believed that you have no power over your thoughts. I was happy one day and sad the next because of that way of thinking. I also got angry quickly and couldn't figure out how to fix easy problems in my business, relationships, and job. But I learned how to think better by writing in a diary, reading, and thinking about myself a lot. In what way do I know I can think better now than before? I am no longer ruled by my thoughts, and this makes me very happy. The way I use my mind is no longer the other way around. That, to me, is what better thinking means. It is not about how smart you are or how many math problems you can solve. It is about how you use your mind to get what you want. While I don't claim to know everything there is to know about how to think better, I do know how to use my thoughts to live a happy, healthier, richer, and more worthwhile life. Change your thoughts, change your life, is true for me. I gave up on starting my own business, was very stressed, and hated my life just 3 short years ago. I felt stuck. I don't want to make my situation sound too serious, though. I think we've all been there, and if you haven't felt stuck in your life yet, you will. It's a normal part of modern life. I don't mean to scare you, but you know how these self-help books end, right? They want you to believe that I was down and out, I lost all my money, I was depressed, my life sucked, but then I discovered X, and then my life changed. To be honest, I'm not any different. Like, I want to sell you on the idea of useful and useless thoughts in this book. But there's a difference. I'm only giving you my point of view. You choose what to do with it. The famous quote from realist and founder of functional psychology John Dewey is, "The true is that which works." But that doesn't mean we should believe everything we read or hear. That would be crazy. We need to stay grounded, look at the facts, listen to other people, and only then come to useful decisions if we want to always think straight. To think clearly, you have to work at it. I compare the mind to a body that needs regular exercise to stay strong. To keep your mind sharp, you can learn new things. I thought that learning stopped when school did, though. For some, that's the end of high school. For others, it's the end of college or graduate school. We pick up new skills, ideas, and theories at school that change how we think and act in the world. But once we have a way of thinking, we don't change it very often. We like having the same thoughts because they make us feel comfortable. We know that new things are scary, so we do everything we can to stay away from them. We're creatures of habit who would rather let our minds rest than work hard at something. The phrase, "I need to relax and watch something on Netflix," is used by a lot of people these days. I've also said it. That makes me think, why do we need to rest? From the work tasks we do over and over again, thought processes that we are used to. When we're not under a lot of stress, like when we have an exam or test to take, we don't really push our minds. We might ask, what's the point? But the point is to train your mind, just like you train your body to stay healthy. Why not work out your mind the same way you work out your body? You don't go to the gym for 4 years and then stop going for good. Also, your mind is the most important thing you have, and you need to train it to use it correctly. Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher, said it best. The life of wisdom is a life of reason. It is important to learn how to think clearly. Thinking clearly isn't something you can just do. You need to train yourself to do it. Epictetus said that we need to get good training because we don't know how to do it. My thoughts were all over the place for most of my life. I never even thought about thinking. This is how my thoughts would look if you asked me to draw them. Diagram, a drawing that is all over the place. That mess you see up there is what my mind looked like on the inside. It was a mess of good, bad, sad, happy, and most of all, confused thoughts. I always asked myself, why can't my brain stop? Where's the pause button? Now that I think about it, I didn't know how to make the most of my beautiful brain. I went from Leeuwarden, the Netherlands, where I grew up, to London in 2014. It was a big change from where I lived before. The place I moved from had 100,000 people living in it. Now it has 7 million. Finding a place to live was especially hard. Things were tougher than I thought they would be. I learned from reading about it and talking to my new co-workers that it was almost impossible to find an apartment quickly without getting ripped off. I opted to rent a room instead, which was easier for 3 months, and I chose to explore different parts of London that were only an hour's ride on public transportation from where I worked. That was my plan, and at first everything went well. After 2 months, I finally found a cheap, small, one-bedroom flat in Oldsfield, which is in the southwest of London. I had everything planned out. I got out of the room rental agreement and signed the one for the new place. My parents and brother came over from Holland to help. Since I didn't have much stuff, we could use their car to move it from the old place to the new one, which was only 10 minutes away. This seems like the deal to me. After getting the key to the new place, I would just move in. I would give the old owner the keys back, take it easy, and watch Netflix. I thought I could do everything in one day as well. It looks like things didn't go as planned after all. My new landlord changed her mind at the last minute and no longer wants to rent out her flat. This was something she told me the day before I planned to move. I suddenly didn't have a place to live, and my SUV was full of my stuff. I was really scared that night in my parents' hotel room. I had no idea what to do. And now I'm sitting here like a fool because I had nowhere to go and my stuff was in a van. I brought you guys over from Holland. For the rest of the day and evening, I kept blaming myself. You may be wondering, really? Yes, I do think that I may have been a little too extreme when I look back on this. Let's just say what happened. I was a little too emotional, right? That's why I chose this example. It shows how stupid my thought was. I thought about things so much that I lost track of what was going on. What was I thinking when I wasn't clear? Some trouble in the first world? Let's go. As soon as I woke up the next morning, my parents and brother pushed me to stop feeling sad for myself and start looking for a way out. So I told myself, think straight. I knew I needed to get rid of the mess and make things clear. I felt the need to get right to the point. I saw this. On the left, a bunch of thoughts that don't help, like worry, stress, pain, confusion, and not knowing what to do. On the right, a single thought that does help. I wanted to start making tools out of my mind. It was important for me to find a quick answer for my London story. From there it was easy as long as I could think straight. I reserved an Airbnb until I could find a new place to stay. We ended up staying in an Airbnb for a week. The owner changed her mind again and agreed to let me rent the flat. That's why all of my worrying, stressing and thinking were so pointless. How often does that take place? We decide and jump to conclusions so quickly based on what we think. Everyone here is a person. All the time we mess up, change our minds, and think things that aren't true. That's fine. Going crazy with your thoughts is not normal. And after a lot of other pointless thinking, I chose to change. I didn't have a big shock or major event that made me decide to change. Life isn't like a Hollywood movie. I know people who only change after a lot of troubles. At some point, we have to say, enough. And you know what? Many people don't change at all, but we shouldn't worry about that. I had had enough of emotional pain after years of chaos in my head. That's the most beautiful thing I can make it. There's no need for a all is lost moment. Those kinds of things don't happen very often. I began to change my thoughts about 2 years ago, and now I know how to get rid of the chaos in my mind and replace it with focus. There's peace now. The rest of this book will tell you step by step how I did it. But first, I'd like to talk about some history of thought. A short history of thought. We all have thoughts, but not all of them are good. The most important thing is the nature of your thoughts. Alexander the Great, a Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, said it best. The universe changes, but our lives are what we think they are. It's clear that things are changing faster than ever. There are fewer jobs, computers turn you into a zombie, schooling costs a lot of money, living costs rise quickly while wages don't, you have less time for yourself, and so on. It feels like you wake up in a new world every day because life changes so fast. What do you think about that? If you're like me, these events make you think a lot, which means you worry and are unsure. How do I stay alive? How can I make my business fit new market conditions? How can I move up in my job? How am I not going crazy? It's hard to control your thoughts. Thought control has been a goal for as long as people have lived. Philosophers of all times and places have agreed on one thing since the 5th century BC. The mind is a tool for solving problems, and many philosophers say that the quality of your thinking affects the quality of your life. All of these people, Confucius, Socrates, Descartes, and William James, talk about how they think and see the world. A lot of us know that Socrates said to question everything, even yourself. I know one thing, that I know nothing is what Socrates reportedly told the Oracle of Delphi when Socrates was named the greatest man on earth. He is smart because he believes he doesn't know anything. That's a way to think. René Descartes, a French philosopher who lived in the 1600s, went even further. He had doubts about everything in life, even his own survival. How do you know you're not thinking or living in the matrix? That's why he famously said, cogito ergo sum, which means, I think, therefore I am. Descartes came to the conclusion that he must exist because he can think. You do exist, even if your thoughts are crazy. So why not make your life a little more useful, fun, practical, and light-hearted? Have you ever paid attention to your feelings or written them down? I want you to try it for a day. Sit down and write down what you're thinking right now about every 2 hours. Don't be scared of yourself. A lot of the time, our thoughts don't make any sense. We're divided as a species. Descartes also looked over his own ideas and found a lot of problems with them. His main idea is that we should question where our beliefs come from, not the beliefs themselves, since most of them are based on how we or other people see things. How many of your ideas come from what other people have told you, or from how you feel, or what you think at the moment? Being able to tell the difference between truth and lies is at the heart of thought. What is real? What is not true? A practical point of view is one way to look at that question. To quote William James, pragmatism is the attitude of looking away from first things, like principles, categories and supposed necessities, and towards last things, like fruits, consequences, and facts. This means that thoughts should serve a purpose. If they don't, they're useless. This is called straight thinking. Pragmatism is a way of thinking, not a solution. In fact, all thinking is a way of thinking. Your thoughts are an instrument, but they're a conflicting instrument. Thinking is not only hard, it's the single most important thing in life. Remember, the quality of our thoughts determines the quality of our lives, and our decisions are a result of our thoughts. Life is not linear. I always thought in a linear way. A leads to B, and if B is C, A also leads to C. I looked at appearances, first thoughts, and made a lot of assumptions. But my thoughts didn't serve a useful purpose. In fact, they served no purpose at all. Instead of thinking, I followed convention. I let others do the thinking for me. Most of us are like that. I honestly thought I would never have to worry about having a job if I got my college degree until I was about 26 years old. I learned the hard way that nothing is guaranteed in life. You have to work hard to make money, and having a degree has nothing to do with making money. If I had to pick another predictor of career success, I would say skills. The better you are at something, the more value you can add to other people's lives. Most of us think there's a straight line from where we are to where we want to be. For example, let's say your goal is to start a business so you can have more freedom in your life. That was always my goal, and I thought I would just work on it until I reached it. But I had to take a lot of detours along the way. I worked for other people and started businesses that failed. Realizing that life doesn't go in a straight line helps us change the way we think. Along the way, I got down a lot and almost gave up. But now I know that things don't always go as planned, which helps me come up with backup plans or other ways to reach my goals. For example, when I lived in London and Amsterdam, one of my goals was to invest in real estate, but I didn't have enough money to get started. It was in my hometown that I found my first deal. Prices were low, I knew a lot of people, the population was growing, and the city put a lot of money into new businesses and education. 2 months after I decided to look elsewhere, I bought my first deal there. The point is that there are many ways to reach your goals, and if everyone else is doing something, you probably shouldn't either. Your brain is always working, even when you're not thinking. It reads all the information that comes in and compares it to information that it already has stored. It looks for similarities and differences between the pieces of information. This is how we think, and how our brains help us come up with new ideas. The brain is made up of many small networks of neurons that connect to each other. I don't worry about how to directly use the information I learn. I feed my brain with information that interests me, and different kinds of information may be saved in different networks. But I don't mind if I connect the dots later. As Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward, so you have to believe that the dots will connect in the future. If you want the dots to connect in the future, you have to make sure that you form them in your brain. You can only do this by learning, doing, making mistakes, reflecting, or anything else that feeds your brain with information. A heuristic is a strategy we derive from previous experience with a similar problem. One heuristic that everyone knows is trial and error, a strategy for finding answers to problems we face. It's also a way of thinking, but trial and error is not always the most practical strategy. If we would rely on trial and error to build a career, we would probably die before achieving that goal. Life is too short for applying trial and error to everything. Another heuristic that's not practical is social proof. We often make decisions based on what others do or say, and my favorite heuristic is familiarity. It says that past behavior that led to good results is not a guarantee for future results. The familiarity heuristic also explains why we favor things and places we know over novelty. It's one of those things we see every day. We eat the same things, we walk the same route, we make the same mistakes, and we complete the same tasks at work over and over again. And then we complain that our lives are stuck or boring. No wonder you're making decisions based on familiarity. But who says that familiarity is always a good thing? It's good for certainty, but to achieve a breakthrough, you need something different. Making decisions based on heuristic techniques might ease the cognitive load, but they are far from practical, and often heuristics lead to unsatisfying outcomes. If that's the case, take it as a sign that you must change something. Instead of relying on heuristics to filter information and make decisions, rely on the main idea of pragmatism. True is what works, but don't take it too literally. Taking drugs works for me is what a contentious friend told me after I shared this idea with him, and he's right. You can't take this idea too literally, but what can you take literally in life? Take the platitude, "Good things come to those who wait," for example. I don't have to explain that it doesn't mean you should sit at home and wait forever until good things happen. Look at the "true is what works" idea as a filter that you can apply to all the information that goes into your brain when faced with decisions. I ask myself, will the outcome of a decision change the way I live? If you ask that yourself consistently, you'll find that you automatically filter out useless information and only make decisions that have an actual impact on the outcome of your life. You force yourself to use whatever works, what's useful, and what impacts your habits. For example, conventional thinking says that bigger cities also bring you bigger opportunities. I really thought that was true. That's even the main reason I moved to London. And yes, I did seize a big opportunity for me at the time. But I also had bigger responsibilities and problems. Also, I don't like big cities. I hate crowded places, dirty air, and unreasonably high cost of living. Clearly, living in a big city didn't work for me. That way of thinking had a negative impact on the way I lived. That's why I eventually moved back to Leeuwarden. It's quiet. I know a lot of people here. I can work less, make more, and I can drive anywhere in the city within 10 minutes. However, I also realize that for most people, my way of living doesn't work. They might find it boring or not exciting enough. So what works for you? Stop thinking. Thinking is difficult. I never knew how to stop. It's easy to stay inside your head for hours, especially when you're in bed at night. But I can confidently say that 99% of all my thoughts in the past have been useless. I didn't do anything with my thoughts most of the time. I didn't solve a problem, nor did I try to understand difficult ideas or concepts from books. I spent a lot of time in my head doing this. I called that thinking, but it was more like worrying, stressing, freaking out. Call it whatever you want. I call it a preoccupied mind. And with what? And the list goes on. I wonder what my boss thinks. What happens if I screw up and lose my job? I think he doesn't care about me. I just keep failing. Does she love me? Why does my life suck? Why is my life awesome and other people's lives are not? I don't care about my job. Is there something wrong with me? I can't finish anything. What's wrong with me? I want to quit. I just have one question for you. What's the practical use of the above thoughts? Yes, I'm waiting. Still no answer. Exactly. Those types of thoughts are not helping us, but we all have them. So how do you get rid of them? Well, I've learned that you can't get rid of them. Remember, we can't control our consciousness. We can only control what thoughts we follow through on. You only have to be aware of your thoughts, acknowledge them, but never blame yourself or say, "Why do I have these thoughts?" No one has the answer to that. It's better to be aware of your thoughts and decide what you will ignore and what you will give importance to. For example, the thought of quitting whatever I'm doing in my life has been on my mind as long as I remember. When I was in high school, I wanted to quit and just find a job. When I played basketball, I wanted to quit and later did quit. I can go on and on until I reach the present. No matter how much I love what I do, the thought of quitting and just walking away shows up in my mind at least 3 or 4 times a month. In the past, those thoughts cost me many nights of sleep. About 2 years ago, I had enough. I wanted to quit thinking, so I started becoming aware of my thoughts. Instead of always acting on every single thought I had. "You don't control me," I would say to myself like a weirdo. But it works. I'm much calmer and happier because of it. When I want to quit, I still listen to it, because sometimes it is a sign, but more often it's just fear, and I refuse to surrender to it. And neither should you. Inside your control versus outside your control. If you want to have useful thoughts, here's a rule of thumb. Only think about things you can control. That automatically eliminates about 99% of your thoughts, because there's very little you control in life. Only focus on what you control. Things like your desires, actions, words, intentions. What's a useless thought? Anything out of your control and without a useful purpose. Do you ever think about the past? That's the perfect example of a random thought that lacks a purpose. Unless you're reflecting on a past decision or mistake you made, in the case of reflection, you're doing something useful. But other than that, every thought about the past serves no purpose. From that point of view, it's useless. Ever fantasize about the future? That's also useless. I've discovered 2 main types of useful thoughts. 1. Thinking about how you can solve problems. A problem is just an unanswered question. Put your brain to use and think about how you can solve problems. There are a lot of those on this earth. 2. Understanding knowledge. That means this. Try to internalize knowledge and think about how you can use that knowledge to improve your life, career, work, relationships, etc. That's it. You can ignore every other thought. If you're constantly thinking without a useful purpose, it's because you haven't trained your mind yet. You have to get out of your head. If not, you'll go mental. Everyone will, no exception. Ask yourself, is that worth it? Do you really want to waste your time, energy, and life on useless thinking? You and I both know the answer to that. Commit to stop thinking about useless things. Start taking control of your mind. All that worrying about the past and the future is not going to help you. It never did, and it never will. Don't trust your mind. Have you ever made a decision that seemed illogical looking back? We're very illogical beings. Every person creates their own social reality. The way you view the world is completely subjective because we all have cognitive biases. The concept of cognitive biases was introduced in 1972 by 2 psychologists, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. A cognitive bias is a systematic thinking error that impacts judgments and therefore our decisions. My favorite cognitive bias is the attentional bias. It's scientific evidence for the idea that your life is a result of your thoughts. The attentional bias states that our perceptions are affected by our thoughts, and naturally, our perceptions determine our actions and decisions, which make up our lives. If you have negative thoughts, you also have a negative perception of life. That's what it says. The confirmation bias is one of the most well-known cognitive biases. It describes how we act when we want to confirm our beliefs. If you believe in something, you will work hard to find information, clues, and signs to back that up. In other words, you do everything to prove you're not wrong. You don't look at facts, you look at your beliefs. This is what all cognitive biases do. Because of this writing, it comes down to this. Don't base your decisions on your beliefs, obvious logic, or even science. Scientists are human, which means they have cognitive biases, and they're known for finding evidence to support their own ideas. If you want to make better decisions, you don't need more information. Instead, I've found that a pragmatic and neutral point of view leads to better informed decisions. Unfortunately, there is no such thing as the best decision. When I feel like I can't get out of a thought pattern, I look at the list of cognitive biases. It's simple and free. Just go to the Wikipedia page for the list. Most biases seem like common sense, and that's the point. Cognitive biases explain why we do things that don't make sense when we look at the facts. I hate making assumptions, but I do them all the time. If someone doesn't answer my email, I think they don't care. If someone says sorry, I think they're not really sorry. If I have a headache, I think I'm sick. I know I'm not practical because assumptions are not facts. To think clearly, you need to get rid of all assumptions and only look at facts. The pragmatist clings to facts and concreteness, observes truth at work in particular cases, and generalizes. To keep things simple, let's look at two ways to decide, one based on facts and one based on assumptions. Does your product solve a problem, or do you think it does? Can you raise money for your startup, or do you think you will? Will you get a raise, or do you think you will? I try to avoid making assumptions as much as possible. Instead, I like to look at the facts and then come to a conclusion. What if you can't rely on the facts? Well, sometimes you can't find them, or you need to make a decision quickly. In those very rare cases, I like to go with my gut. No matter what you do, don't waste your time on other people's guesses and opinions that aren't based on facts. True versus untrue. In the previous chapter, we talked about looking at facts. But are facts also the truth? The answer is no. Confusing, right? It's just like life. For example, does God exist? I don't know. I've never seen any evidence. Does that mean God is not real? It doesn't matter what I think. If God has an impact on the way you live, it's true for you, no matter what scientists say. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher who had a profound impact on Western philosophy, famously said, "There are no facts, only interpretations." Nietzsche was a man of true self-knowledge. Sigmund Freud even said that he had a more penetrating knowledge of himself than any other man who ever lived or was ever likely to live. He was a very analytical thinker, especially when it came to his own thoughts. When Nietzsche said that there are no facts, he meant that we as human beings ultimately rely on our interpretations of reality. There's no way to confirm reality objectively. That doesn't mean nothing is real and that we're all living in a big dream. We just have to realize that facts are not the same thing as the truth. That simple thought saves you a lot of energy because it means no one can be right or wrong. Don't bother with convincing people with different opinions of the truth. It's just not a practical thing to do. Save your energy for other more useful things. Take your time to think. He thinks on his feet. He's really smart. I believed this for a long time. Whenever I had a problem, a conversation, or someone asked me a question, I would think, quick, quick, quick. Naturally, my first answer sucked. Derek Sivers, one of my favorite thinkers, says he's a slow thinker. It's a common belief that your first reaction is the most honest, but I disagree. Your first reaction is usually outdated. Either it's an answer you came up with long ago and now use instead of thinking, or it's triggering a knee-jerk emotional response to something that happened long ago. Thinking things through takes time. Every time I gave a quick answer, I wasn't thinking at all. I was impulsive. Derek Sivers trained himself not to trust his first thoughts. That's also what he did when his email consumed too much of his time and attention. Being a public figure, Derek received a lot of emails from his readers. Most of them contained quick 5-minute questions. But as he says, if you get 100 of those questions, that adds up to 8 hours in a day. After answering 192,000 emails between 2008 and 2016, Derek knew he needed to do something about it. So he planned to go off the grid like a modern-day Henry David Thoreau. I was going to go hardcore, shut off all email and social media, and make myself unreachable to all but a few close friends and colleagues. It felt like the only solution. That was his first thought. But then, I realized I could remain reachable as long as I don't answer questions, is what Derek writes on his blog. I'm glad he didn't act on his first idea. His second idea is much better. I've emailed Derek myself in the past, and I think what he does makes a big impact on people's lives. What I'm trying to say is that when someone asks you a question, it's okay to say, "I don't know." You can also say that to yourself. I've often been too hard on myself because I didn't have an instant answer to my personal problems. That doesn't make you dumb. It makes you human. Why are we even afraid that people think we're stupid? It's the perfect example of slow thinking. Instead of following your instinct of, "I'll prove them," you can take a step back and ask yourself, why do I even want to come across as smart? If you really think about it, it doesn't matter what others think of you. I think it's always better to take your time to think. If others think that makes you stupid, they are the ones who are. No more quick decisions. Shall we book a business trip to Thailand? Are you interested in a speaking gig at Company X? Should we renovate the kitchen? Do you think we should fire John Doe? How about hiring another sales executive? Just a few questions others have asked me recently, and you know what? Just as I like to take time to think deeply about my challenges, I also take time to think quick decisions through. Every time I said yes to a speaking gig, interview, or giving a seminar, I didn't think about it for long. When things are in the future, we're more likely to say yes. That trip is planned for September. It's now March. That's ages from now. And without thinking about it, you commit to a 5-day business trip or family vacation. But when September comes, you're either in a great professional flow, have other more important commitments, or are in the middle of something else. Now, all of a sudden, that quick yes from ages ago is on your mind all the time. Should I cancel the trip? Should I go? Should I go for 2 days only? Why do we make things so complicated when we can easily solve these things by just taking an extra day to think? That's all you need. Just think things through. Know yourself. For instance, I'm currently in a great writing flow. I don't feel the need to leave my city. I have a set routine every day, and it works very well for me. I feel happy, and I enjoy my life a lot. When I go away for even a weekend, my whole routine can be messed up, and then I need another 2 weeks to get back to my bold self. However, I don't always have this mindset. Right now, I'm working on this book, opening a new office, and buying a new apartment. I'm focused on a few important things, but other times I'm more flexible and actually do like to travel, visit friends, business partners, and live a looser lifestyle. That's why I now take more time to make decisions instead of following my first thought. I say, please give me a day or two to think about it. That's all you need. Release your mind. Once I changed my perspective on life, I started straining my brain every single day. I started reading 2 hours a day and taking extensive notes of the things I learned. I also started writing articles to share the ideas I learned. In the beginning, I felt like a new world opened up to me. I couldn't get enough of learning more. I bought new books every week and devoured every piece of new knowledge I could get my hands on. But after a few weeks, I had a mental breakdown. All of a sudden, my mind froze up. I felt blocked. I couldn't think, read, or write. My head hurt all day long. That went on for a few days, almost a week. I felt ill, and I didn't understand why. I couldn't even think about why. And when I felt better, I just picked up where I left off. This time I went on for longer, about 2 months before I hit another wall. But this time it was different again. No matter what I tried, I didn't feel like I was improving or learning new things. But I kept going and pushing through the difficulty. After this pattern occurred a few times, I finally understood what was going on. Training your mind happens in stages, and before you can move on to the next phase of your learning development, you have to get through a wall. I believe that both learning skills and developing yourself happen in stages. At the beginning of a new stage, things are easy to learn because everything is new. But the closer you get to the end of a stage, things get more difficult. In my case, I got headaches, but I wasn't near the end yet, because after a short setback, I got back at it again. At some point, you hit a big wall. That's the mental breakdown. It's also a point at which you want to give up whatever you're trying to achieve. Writing a book, starting a business, changing your career, or leading a group of people. When you hit a wall, everything stops. The book all of a sudden seems useless. Words have been our primary way to communicate, and that's why we also think in words. When I think, I talk to myself, and when I take notes, I also talk to myself. Create a chapter about drawing your thoughts, is what I wrote in my notebook when I came up with the idea for this chapter. I find that fascinating. One of the best-known thinkers of all time, Leonardo da Vinci, thought visually. How do I know this? I took a look at his notebooks, which you can easily find if you Google them. Here's an example. Now, we don't have to become this great at drawing, but I think we can still learn something. Drawing frees your mind from the constant verbalization. I started drawing the images from my blog posts over a year ago. My drawing skills haven't improved, but my articles have. And one of the reasons is that I take time to think about how I can visually share my idea. I want readers to immediately get what I'm trying to share in the article by looking at my drawings. That's why I think a lot about visualizing an idea. Sometimes I draw a graph. Sometimes I emphasize a sentence or word, and I even make simple cartoons. After I make the drawing, I often edit my article to make my idea clearer, and some articles even start with a drawing. This book also started with a drawing. It's the drawing I used in the From Chaos to Clarity chapter. Here it is again. I made that drawing without a purpose. I was just visualizing some of my ideas. One of my ideas is that it used to be chaos in my mind until I found a way to overcome it. As a result, I think clearly. That's the whole drawing, and now it's a book. René Descartes. Be yourself, not what you should be. Beat yourself instead of the world. What are you good at? What are you bad at? How do you learn new things? What do you love, and what do you hate? In other words, who are you? What's your DNA? Yes, biologically, we're all pretty much the same. We all have organs, bones, blood, nerves, and we all die. Why is knowing yourself important? I had no idea. No one ever talked about it in school. But I made bad choices because I didn't know myself well enough. The jobs I had, the girls I dated, the things I chased, the choices I made, and the people I spent time with didn't match my strengths, values, skills, and desires. For example, my ex-girlfriend wanted to live in different countries and travel the world. I don't like that idea. I want to stay close to my family and best friends. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything if I don't go. I worked in boiler rooms selling useless things to people who didn't need them. I don't know why I did that, but I probably did it for the money. I thought that's what you do, but I didn't know myself. I know myself better now than I did 10 years ago, and I'll know myself better in 10 years. Knowing yourself is the first step. Acting on that knowledge is the second. Sometimes opportunities come my way. You might not have time to think when it's not important, but make it a priority. If you don't, you'll end up like I did a few years ago. I didn't think about anything from 2012 to 2015, and all of a sudden I felt overwhelmed and didn't know what to do with my life. I had a real midlife crisis. I didn't know what to do, so I started reading more books. I noticed that many smart and happy people kept journals and thought more about their lives. Specifically, they thought about the things they learned, the mistakes they made, and the goals they reached. When I started writing in my journal every day, I started by writing my autobiography. It's not meant to be published. It's meant to help me learn and reflect. If you don't know what to write about, write your lips. My money rules. One of my friends told me he hates his job. I asked him why he didn't take any action. "I need the money," he said. I automatically knew that he assumed that the only option for him is to quit. The reason is that we become too dependent on something when we give it too much importance. There's a simple solution to devalue the value of money. I live by these 5 rules. That's what I've done for the past 3 years, and I haven't had a single thought about money. Actually, that's not true. I still think about money. Everybody does. But as soon as I think I have enough money in my savings account, I stop thinking about money. No matter what happens, if you have enough money to survive for 6 months, you'll figure it out. There's only one condition: invest in your skills. It's naive to think we'll always be able to find a job or make money, but since when is that a surprise? I just make sure I invest my money instead of spending it. Investing money is not only about investing in the stock market or in real estate. I have no problem paying $3,000 for a new laptop because it's a tool I use to do my job, and that makes me money. Also, I'm never cheap when it comes to buying important things. I'd rather buy a good jacket that lasts years than buy a cheap one that I have to replace next year. Simply put, I don't buy things I don't need. I don't need a new iPhone every year. I also don't need $5,000 shoes. But that doesn't mean I own only one pair of shoes. I simply don't buy everything I like. Buying stuff in excess is not practical because I don't have enough space. Plus, I like to train myself to resist things to improve my self-discipline. Remember, money is a replaceable resource. When you're out of it, you can earn it back. You can't say the same for time. Don't spend too much time thinking about money. Don't try to think your way out of everything. This doesn't make sense at first sight, but when you think too hard, you often come up with bad ideas. That's because you can't actively think your way out of everything. We've all had good ideas while taking a shower. That's because we're not actively thinking. It's good to let your attention wander and stop thinking. This is also a part of controlling your mind. You have the ability to decide when you want to let go of your thoughts, similar to relaxing your muscles when you lay on the couch after a tough day. You can let loose of your thoughts. You can do that in many different ways. Some like to take a yoga class. Others prefer to meditate every day. The medium doesn't matter. I've learned that there are many ways to relax. However, only one thing is critical. You don't need anything to relax but yourself. You don't need yoga, exercise, meditation, music, scents, or whatever it is you think you need. Let go of everything. You can escape your outside world and go inside your mind to find peace. If you can't do that right now, train yourself. Become aware of your thoughts, observe them, and let them go. That's the whole process. You can do that anytime, any place. You don't need a different scenery or class to do those things. Let go and relax, and do it as often as you think is necessary. You'll find that the moments you're not thinking are just as important as the times you are actively thinking. Be unconventional. I've grown to hate conventional thinking, not because I want to be different, but because conventional thinking gives you conventional results. I don't like that, and if you liked conventional results, you wouldn't be reading this book. Let's examine decision-making for a second. The most conventional method for decision-making is to create a pros and cons list. Benjamin Franklin is the first who documented this method. He wrote about it to his friend Joseph Priestley in a letter to him in 1772. And today, we create these lists all the time. What are the pros and cons of quitting my job, breaking up with my boyfriend, taking this job offer, buying a new car, starting a business? And then we take a sheet of paper, draw a line in the middle of it, and start listing the pros on the left and the cons on the right, or vice versa. Even though I like the simplicity of this method, I stopped using it after one of my friends recommended me to create one of these lists when my first relationship hit a rough patch. I actually made a pros and cons list for breaking up with my then girlfriend. When I think about it now, I'm ashamed, and it didn't even make any sense because there are always factors that, by themselves, outweigh all of the other factors. Nearly all pros and cons lists for relationships are the same. Pros of staying in a relationship: having someone to share everything with. You can have sex, go on holidays, etc. Cons of staying in a relationship: less free time for myself, getting in fights, going to in-laws, etc. It's always the same, and it's not useful. The same is true for quitting a job you hate. The pro is that you're free from a bad job. The con is that there's a lot of uncertainty. It's time to break free from this conventional thinking. Instead of binary thinking, start thinking more abundantly. It's not this or that. In life, you can have this and that. I always thought I had to either quit my business or take a job. Also, many of my friends think you should quit your job to start a business. Whoever said these things? When my business wasn't growing a few years ago, I just took a job at a large IT research firm. I did both things. I ran my business in the evenings and weekends, and sometimes during the day, and the rest of my time I did my work for the firm. Also, you can start a business while you still have a job. That's what I mean when I talk about thinking outside of the box. We always limit ourselves by narrow and conventional thinking. We always want to stay within a box. That's because we never take a step back to look at the larger picture. Take a look at the drawing below. If you're standing inside the maze, you'll probably start walking towards the middle, right? That's what you should do when you're in a maze. However, this maze is different. The prize is not in the middle, it's outside the maze, but you can only see the goal if you take a helicopter view. It's impossible to see the goal from within the maze, and yet that's how most of us live. We do things conventionally because that's how it's done. When you stop doing things the way they're done, you'll start doing things how you get it done. Don't ask why. I'm a fool with sending emails, especially when it comes to selecting the recipients. I always type the first letter of a name and hit enter. I trust the computer and never check whether the address I've selected is actually the person I want to mail. I'm lazy. Often it doesn't matter, and I get funny responses back from people. But one time, this simple mistake cost me $150,000 in business. I was working with 2 companies on a multi-year consulting deal. Both of my contacts had the same name. Let's call them Vim. One Vim was an existing client. Let's call him Vim A, and the other was a prospect, Vim B. Both guys wanted the same type of consulting for their companies, but I gave Vim A a better rate because he was a loyal customer. However, instead of sending the contract to Vim A, I sent the contract to Vim B. This time, it wasn't an innocent mistake. Vim B previously had seen my proposal, which had a higher total price. But when he saw that Vim A got a lower rate, he was upset. Why does he get a lower rate? Is that how you do business? He decided not to do business with us. I learned 3 things. 1. Always double-check. 2. Small things can become big things. 3. Don't play favors. There's no use in asking why I made a mistake or why I was always lazy with email. I just was, and I was wrong. There's no way to justify my mistake. Never brush important details off and say, it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't matter that you hit snooze every single day or that you ignore the details of your book report or movie. The point is that not striving for perfection becomes a habit. Don't worry about being a perfectionist. There's no such thing. People aren't always perfect. Perfectionism is just an excuse for being afraid of what other people think of our work. No matter what, don't ask why when you face problems, challenges, or mistakes. Instead, think about what you can do to get past or stop the things that are stopping you. Pay even more attention to the details. I missed a small detail that cost me a lot of business, but the lesson I learned was worth more than the business I could have gained. Details are probably the most important thing in business, work, sports, art, and life in general. One of my favorite sayings is, "The devil is in the details." But I never followed that advice because I was too impatient. I was always trying to rush through everything: emails, calls, reports, assignments, essays, and so on. That was my first title, The Art of Practicality. I liked it at first because it sounded familiar, but as I wrote a book about thinking, I used the same techniques for my own book. That's when I asked myself, what does the art of even mean? I didn't have a good answer, so I knew I had to change the title. Funny thing is that my second title was The Power of Pragmatic Thinking Like a Genius. I came up with another generic title that was even longer than the first one. How many books start with The Power of? I searched for The Power of in 83,195 book titles on Goodreads. That's a lot of books with those words in the title or subtitle. I learned that when you write a book, you need to make it stand out. No one cares about a better book on thinking. You probably picked up this book because you were expecting something different. But with the other books I had written, I knew no one would think it would be different. I began pushing Think Straight on my website and social media 2 weeks before it came out, and my fans became very excited very quickly. Soon I was getting emails like this: "Can't wait for the book. Great job. I can't wait to read your new book. You are very determined. I'm looking forward to Think Straight. I love my readers." That's why I spent a lot of time making sure the title was right. There was no one reading the book at that point, but the title got people interested, which was my goal. Thanks to everyone who emailed me before the start. I hope I heard you. Make a winky face. Just doing your job means thinking about the little things. Authors, it's your job to make sure your book is the best it can be. It is your job as a creator to make the best design possible. There's no way for you to write one book or create one product and then quit. You have to keep going over the details if you want to grow mentally, emotionally, and financially. Don't forget or undervalue things if you want to do a good job. If you can't, don't do the job at all. Take the thought process out of it. I don't want to turn into someone who thinks all the time but never does anything. I think the only reason is that I want to make my life more interesting. I enjoy getting more out of things because it makes me happy. That's the reason I don't like to think about every day. It sounds strange, doesn't it? You say you need to think more, but now you say you're not thinking as much. Yes, that's exactly what I mean. If you improve the quality of your thoughts, you will also improve the quality of your deeds. Remember that acting is always more important than thinking. Getting into habits is the best way to make sure you do more. As an example, think about exercise. I've always had a hard time keeping in shape, and I was overweight for a long time. When it came to exercise and food, I always played thought games with myself. Should I work out or go for a run? I'm going to the gym tomorrow after eating these chips. Which days should I work out? Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or maybe every Tuesday and Thursday. That is too much thinking. That doesn't help. To help you stick to my simple rules, you should work out for at least 30 minutes every day, but don't overdo it. You should also eat healthy foods and avoid junk food, and you should keep track of what you eat and how much you exercise. Putting together a few rules makes a system, and systems help you do things without having to think about them. If your method doesn't give you the results you want, all you have to do is think. I would change my method if it made me feel bad or make me gain weight. It's never perfect, even if it does work. So, I often think about what I can change or how I can make my processes better. Do not dwell on your mistakes. My grandma was always around when I was a kid. There was a time when she was maybe too kind because she gave up a lot for her parents, brothers and sisters, husband, and then her children. That's life too. She gave up a lot to live in the Netherlands for the last part of her life instead of her home country of Iran. You can't live together and build a strong family without giving. Because she felt so bad about the past, she talked about it all the time, and especially in her last few years, she almost cried every day. My mother, father, brother and I went to see her a lot and made her laugh, which was nice, but I could always feel the sadness. My grandma taught me a lot, mostly about being kind and how important it is to have strong family values. But the most important thing she taught me was that you don't regret what you did, you regret what you didn't do. When my grandma died in January 2015, I made up my mind to always remember that lesson. In the past, I always thought I wanted to live in different places and visit the world. I understand that it's not a new goal. A lot of the people I talk to love the idea of being free and exploring. Why does that happen? A lot of it comes from pop culture, in my opinion. A lot of people look up to famous travelers like Jack Kerouac and Ernest Hemingway. These days, young people look up to social media stars who also travel the world and post Instagram photos of their adventures. Even though the way you travel and share your memories has changed, the desire to do so has not. That way of life isn't for everyone, though, and I didn't know that before I started moving. I mean, how could I? You have to go through some things in life to really know what they're like. You can't really know what it's like to be a business until you try it. Reading business books and watching videos about starting your own business won't make you an entrepreneur. Ever. You'll end up living the life of someone else. I would rather eat rice and beans and do the things I love than work at a job that makes me unhappy. But it pays well. In the end, this is your life, and the only way to be happy with it is to do what you really want. Just make sure you have clear thoughts so that you act on them. Don't look back. I don't think about my past very often. By day, I don't think about the past. I don't watch old movies all day. So caught up in the present that I don't even think about taking shots. I think that most people live their lives in the past tense, which makes me sad sometimes. So they don't enjoy the moment. They take a picture of it with their phone. I'd rather be present all the time than live life through a screen. I'll be honest and say that I'm not always fully present, but I'm trying to live in the present, and I know I'm doing a good job because I never want to go back and remember the past. I'm having too much fun right now. That doesn't mean I never take a picture of my family. I just don't take a lot of pictures that I'll never look at again. When do you have time to look back at all your memories? How many movies and pictures do you have? How many old records, awards, mementos, and other real items do you keep that make you think of the past? For those of you who find it hard to let go, I have some good news. You will never use that old iPhone that you've had in your desk drawer for years. Change that movie from your trip with friends over the weekend. Check out your old quizzes, articles and grades. Put on those old clothes you've been putting away. Use the thing that makes you think of your first date in any way you want. Many things from the past get in the way of living in the present when we hold on to them. I can think of no good reason to look back other than to learn. If you look at your past, you can learn a lot. That's why I like writing in a book. I often read back over my journal writings to figure out what I was thinking at the time, especially when things don't go as planned. I try to figure out why I went back. I started a paid membership site in 2017 after writing regularly for 2 years and getting more than 22,000 people to sign up for my email. I thought about the membership site too much before I started it. With the help of 1,000 readers giving me $5 a month, I can write, train, and help other people for a job. Members who pay will get material from me that no one else has. That's a good deal. That's how I thought about it. I got the idea for 1,000 from Kevin Kelly's important article, 1,000 True Fans. I also looked at how other blogs started their membership sites. I had sold hundreds of online classes before that, so I knew people liked my work. At least, it looked good on paper. But what I thought would happen didn't happen. 78 people signed up after a month. I shut down the membership page after 6 weeks. A lot of people, including paid members, friends and co-workers, told me I stopped too soon. That's possible, but I don't give up when things get tough. During the 6.5 years it took me to get 2 degrees, I often thought about dropping out. Also, because it's so hard to make money, I've thought about leaving my family business many times. That will never change though. I didn't quit my membership site because I got it wrong. It will take me more than a year to get 1,000 paid users at this rate. Besides, 6 people cancelled in the first month, which means it will take me even longer if I include those. Also, for the past 6 weeks, I've felt obligated to give my paid members special material. The stress of making sure they get something from the membership takes up a lot of time that I could be using to grow our family business or my teaching business. In the end, I don't think a membership site is the best way to go. Instead of just adding 1078 to the number, I gave it more thought. How can people stay? How much do you have to do? What other options do I have to reach my goals? I can help people in a lot of other ways as well. I also make a living in a lot of other ways. Because of this, I shut down my membership site after only 6 weeks. It's not the end of the world if things don't work out. Choose something, stick to it, and move on. Only look back to learn. When I think about the time I wasted trying to start a membership site, it was easy to see what I could have done differently. It took me 3 months to make the club area, write copy, add material, and so on. It was clear to me from the start that running a membership site would take time. Do you remember the part about specifics? Do the job right, or don't do it at all. I should not have done anything at all in this case. Why? I didn't have time for myself because I was too busy running my family business, writing books and papers, making classes, and advising. I've learned that I can only handle one big job at a time in every part of my life. You should look back, but don't stare for too long. Life is going on now. Take good care of your time. Time is running out. We all learn that one day, and once we do, we start to pay more attention to how we spend our time. Thoughts are like a sword with 2 edges. It can make you stronger or weaker. What will happen depends on how you think. Your mind is just a tool, nothing more or less. I talked about how I've learned to use my brain better in this book. There are times when you need to change the way you think, and times when you need to stop thinking. You should choose when to use each way, but don't think too much. That's a waste of time. But in the end, thinking is pointless if you don't do anything. But, as we already said, action comes after thought. Good ideas lead to good deeds. To make my point clearer, here are some thoughts that I believe will help you. Improving your life, growing your business and job, picturing your future, coming up with new ideas, fixing problems, and planning fun things to do with your partner, family, or friends. It's not that hard to understand. It's hard and takes work to stay with this way of thought, though. If you only read this book once, don't think you'll become a useful thinker. Like any other skill, thinking better needs to be practiced every day. I do that by seeing everything that happens to me as a chance to think more clearly. If I don't, I waste time on pointless things like whining, feeling sorry for myself, and not enjoying my life. As a group, we think so much that we miss out on life, and it has nothing to do with the cool things other people do. Everybody knows that the little things in life are what make it beautiful. When you woke up this morning, did you notice the sun or the drops of rain? Did you notice how your coffee smells? Did you touch your grains to see how they felt? If the answer is no, you need to get out of your head with your thoughts and start feeling. Intercom. This whole thing has only one goal. Intercom. Your mind should always be calm, no matter what goes on in your life or what happens to you. That's the most important thing in life. If we have mastery of the mind, we are in charge of our thoughts. Remember that the only way to do that is to practice every day. Mindfulness or meditation are two words that people may use to describe it. Don't make it too hard to understand, no matter what you call it. Finding intercom. You don't have to pay $10,000 for a school to learn how to calm down. Sit down, connect with your thoughts, notice them, and then push them aside. That's all there is to how to meditate. Every time I walk, work out, write, wait, sit, lie down, or do anything else, I meditate. To find peace, I can always make time and energy to go inside. I'm ready to go. That's important to understand. That's right, you don't need a yoga mat, music, or a guide to learn how to control your thoughts. I've said it before, but it's that important. Anytime you want to calm down, you can go inside yourself. You don't need a drink, a vacation, or new shoes either. How do I understand this? What I think I control. What it does is up to me. You can too. Think about other people. A lot of the ideas I wrote about in this book come from the pragmatist school of thought. If you look up pragmatism, you'll probably find that Charles Sanders Peirce, who used to teach at Johns Hopkins University, started the trend. But if you read more about the philosophy's history, you'll find that William James was the one who named Peirce as its father in 1898. Some people thought highly of Charles Sanders Peirce as an intellectual in the 1880s, but by the end of the 1800s, he had lost favor. In the 1860s, James and Peirce met while they were both students at Harvard's Lawrence Scientific School. Peirce was once seen as a math and logic genius. He later became a professor at Johns Hopkins University, but he was fired in 1884 because of a scandal involving his second marriage. It's a really sad story. In 1875, Peirce's first wife left him. Not long after, he started seeing another woman while he was still formally married. But after 8 years, his split was final. He lived with a woman he wasn't married to during those 8 years. He was fired after Simon Newcomb, who worked with Peirce, apparently told on him. This caused a public scandal. Peirce was sad that he never found work in academia again, and he was poor for many years. He even slept and lived on the streets of New York City for years after he was fired. William James, an old friend, was the only one who helped him. After getting over his sadness in 1870, James began to write a body of work that is still important today. James earned a Harvard professorship and fame in the academic world after writing Principles of Psychology, a book that came out in 1890 after 12 years of work. Unlike his friend, James's career had been going up for years. Then, out of the blue, in 1898, he gave the idea of pragmatism to the long-forgotten Charles Sanders Peirce in a talk called Philosophical Conceptions and Practical Results. Pragmatism means that ideas should be judged by how useful they are in real life. James thought that scientists were wasting their time on theories and ideas that were too general and didn't apply to real life. If a scientist showed how the earth was made, would you change how you live? Puritans believe that we can never have complete proof of anything. Louis Manon, who wrote Pragmatism, a Reader, says this about this idea. Every choice we make is based on what we think the world will do or be today. No matter what people think about practicality, one thing is certain. Giving Peirce credit for the idea was a good thing that James did. And that's what makes James so great. It wasn't his goal to get credit for something he made. Because Peirce would not be known, and practicality would not exist without James's deeds and support of it. James did something important when he did that. He helped a pal. Peirce got some attention, and in his later years, he even wrote a few papers. That's the most important thing I've learned from James. William James said, "The greatest use of a life is to spend it on something that will outlast it. In real life, there's no point in doing something that will outlast you because you won't be around to see it. That's not the point, though. Every day, if we remember that we should try to do or make things that are useful and important to other people, we will spend our time on things that really matter. If you do that, everyone's life will have value. Thank you so much for coming with me on this trip. My goal was for you to understand how I think. I hope this book helps you stay strong and that you read it more than once, especially when things are hard. That you took the time to finish things makes me happy. People who read a lot of books might think that picking one over the other isn't important, but for me, as the author, it's everything. Thanks for that.